Hello my friends and welcome. Summer is winding down and I'm back in the studio. I'm sure many of you thought this channel was dead and I had quit making videos. Let me just say this.
I'm just getting started.
As promised, here's the remainder of the Miyazaki interview from earlier this summer. We do want users to enjoy that aspect of exploration and uncover the map for themselves. But we also wanted to take into account that level of comfort and ease of play. So we have incorporated fast travel for those long distances. With this increased sense of scale and this vast new map, we had to allow for a certain amount of progression and reward, no matter which direction the player took and which path they take. Because of that high level of freedom, you will find those elements to battle and those elements to just exploring the world, which will allow you to keep going. You can customize and craft items on the go by using materials found in the world. There are also more resources to recover health on the way, as you'll be fighting for a longer time than before. The key word I think is retention, and retaining a sense of progression. So we wanted them to keep going, to keep that flow as they explore and they journey through the map. So to give an example from a previous game, you could call the resurrection mechanic in Sekiro a retention of the sense of progress, and not wanting to spoil that sense of rhythm or tempo the player has as they play. So we have a couple of elements in Elden Ring which come from a similar kind of breed, something that will keep them going and keep them encouraged to explore further, but you won't be able to resurrect in this game. We think rather than recommending a specific way for players to tackle each encounter, one of the things we wanted to stress in this game was, again, that freedom to choose how to take on encounters and how to approach these various situations. So there's a large variety of ways you can approach combat, and a large range of abilities you can acquire. We wanted to allow the players to combine these different elements to find their own strategy, and even take indirect approaches to combat if they wanted to. So yes, this is something that we wanted to explore more so than our previous games, and really focus on, is this level of variety and this level of freedom in combat. Part of making this new world with this new huge sense of scale was adding enjoyment to that sense of exploration, having players feel encouraged and give them a desire to explore as much as they want. And so that could be through acquiring new weapons and magic spells and abilities such as the different spirit summons. We wanted to place these elements so the players will enjoy exploring the map and discovering these elements for themselves. There are cases in which you can buy them at stores or learn them from NPCs, but generally they're hidden throughout the game's world for the player to discover through exploration, rather than unlocking them through a skill tree as in previous titles. I think one thing that's worth mentioning is the skills, which is a returning feature from previous games. But again, we're concentrating on the level of freedom that it gives the player. So before, where there was a certain skill attached to a certain weapon, now you're actually able to freely interchange skills between a large variety of weapons. There are, I believe, around 100 skills in total. Obviously, you're free to combine your different skills with different weapons. You're free to build your character with different weapons and equipment. You're free to learn magic as well. So if you throw all these things in, we think the build customization is going to be even richer and even more varied than before. The stamina bar exists in Elden Ring, but we feel it has less influence on the player overall. We wanted to make it feel less restrictive and contribute to that level of freedom, more so than our previous titles. Stealth. We think it's a relatively simple implementation of stealth, but it has a wide variety of uses. And again, it contributes to this level of player freedom. So you're able to crouch. You're able to sneak and be less easily detected in long grass, for instance. You're able to use that to your advantage to sneak up on the enemy, get a backstab, get a stealth attack. But you're also able to use it to bypass certain areas and to assess situations from afar. We wanted to create these opportunities for players to see what lies ahead of them, and below them and around them, and to assess how they're going to confront that, or not as the case may be. So stealth, while again it's simple implementation, it allows for a lot more of these possibilities. Spirit summons. Usually they're the enemy character, but you can summon them as allies to assist you in battle. So those were the local offline summons. And these spirit summons, we feel like, as well as there being a large variety of them, they're a nice collectible hidden element within the game world to discover and to equip as you go. They offer a lot of different strategic options, But also, the player might find they dislike a certain enemy tagging along with them. A certain summon pleases them aesthetically. So there's a lot of strategic and a lot of personal touch to these summons. And of course, in Elden Ring, you will still be able to summon fellow players for cooperative play. World development. We think one main difference is having the involvement of George R.R. Martin from the start, and having him paint that picture of the world's history and mythos. We sorta had an element of the world building first, to then explore the game systems and the rest of the game from that. This was quite a fresh approach, and rather than imposing new restrictions on the game, George Martin himself was very open to us prioritizing the game systems and leaving out anything we didn't want to explore. But it ended up not being like that. It ended up being a huge source of inspiration and impetus for the design of the game. So the world building and the systems went hand in hand. It really was a great collaboration. We had this initial impetus from George R.R. Martin's mythos, and we used that to paint the foundation and the initial layers of the game. An example of that would be how characters are tarnished and they lost grace. This is the initial spurring moment for the player character. But then on top of that, we're obviously going to build a lot of our own world building, and our own story elements and other gameplay elements that are necessary to the game, and necessary to the player's guidance, and how they find a footing in the world. Right from the start, we do have elements in place that are going to lead the player down that mainline track, that they're free to branch off at any time they like. On top of that, there are fragmented pieces of the story that are able to find and decipher as they go. This element of the world building and lore has not changed from previous titles, but it's obviously built on that foundation of George Martin's lore. So again, the game and the narrative go hand in hand in that respect. Story. There are two things we wanted to really concentrate on with this topic. One is the ease of understanding, the level of understanding the players have of the story and the narrative, and we feel like because this is a game that's based around its characters, this is a lot easier to understand, a lot easier to approach in that sense, so it's less abstract. While the player characters themselves is, as you might be familiar with other games, a little more nameless, a little more of a blank slate for the player to project themselves onto. Other characters will provide that sense of depth and that sense of color and ulterior motives that are going to keep them engaged and keep them second guessing as they explore through the world. We hope that that level of understanding is easy to access, but then again, there's a lot more there as they explore. This idea of uncovering the world as you go, picking up as many little pieces, it's multi-layered, it's complex, it's very fascinating. This is something I myself enjoy a lot in these games, and in other RPGs I play. We had the greedy approach of wanting to make these two elements stand together, of wanting it to be easy to understand, but also give it a lot of depth. But we feel that with George Martin and the story base that he provided for us, this has been not only attainable, but very successful this time. Conclusion. This is actually our first interview for Elden Ring, so we really appreciate your time. In a single interview, it's very hard to go into a great deal of detail and to answer all of your questions. I imagine there's a lot that's difficult to imagine, difficult to grasp, but as far as I'm concerned, after my 10 years or so of directing games, this really feels like a culmination of everything that I've enjoyed about game development and everything I've brought to this point. I really hope that as a fan of the games, you'll enjoy it. On behalf of the whole team at From, this is a compilation of everyone's passion here and everyone's dedication. So we were just really enthusiastic about this project, and we can't wait for people to play it. Alright, that's it for this interview. Keep an eye out for future videos. Have fun, and stay safe, my friend.